So, hi everyone. I'm happy you could all join us. My name is Ami. I'm the VP of Process in Atlantium Technologies. And today, together with my dear colleague Asaf Leventhal, we will discuss the issue of what we call AIS. That it does not stand for artificial intelligence software, it stands for Aquatic Invasive Species. So today we will discuss the topic of AIS in water facilities. So I will shortly present Atlantium, then Asaf will describe the problem. Follow that, we will see some of Atlantium's field experience in AIS. So the presentation would take approximately 30 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. So feel free to drop questions using the Q&A button. I think it should be on the bottom of the screen. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are Atlantium, a world leader in water solution for disinfection and chemical photolyzers. We've been in the market for over 20 years now, and we have more than 5,000 installations worldwide. Here you can see some of our clients. So the company is active in many industries, including food and beverage, aquaculture, municipal, pharma, and heavy industry, as we will see today. So now I would like to hand over the presentation to Asaf. Asaf is an Atlantium senior scientist and holds a PhD in microbiology. Thank you for joining, Asaf, after a long day in a validation site. So Asaf, stage is yours.
Hello, so I'm Asaf, Atlantium senior scientist. Let's start with some definitions. So AIS is an aquatic invasive species, which means that it includes both fresh water and seawater organisms. Now, another term you're gonna hear our saying is macrofouling. Now, the best way to describe it is that it is just the images you can see here, which is a lot of muscles, like a bunch of muscles clogging your pipe, your equipment, your pumps. That means that you're going to have some downtime for maintenance, a lot of chemicals to clean it. Sometimes even damage to your infrastructure, and clearly there's a lot of economic consequences. But let's not forget about the environmental issue of invasive species. So now let's see in the area of environment, how does this problem even occurs to begin with? Okay, so this image shows you some routes of ships taking stuff from one continent to another. So ships need to pump in a lot of ballast water. This is water that is meant for balancing the ship, stabilizing it. So the ship takes water from one continent to the other, and that's like the main way by which organisms go from one continent to another. So these white lines are the roads, and the points are some traffic hubs, as Panama Canal and so on. Okay, now during the last decade, this topic is already under regulation, and Atlantium is proud to be one of the solutions, perhaps the most sustainable one for treating ballast water. But this is not the topic of our webinar. We are going to talk about what happens when these mussels or invasive species are already in a new place and doing a lot of troubles. So next map. Here, the points are areas where we do already have invasions of, in this case, we are talking about the Asian clam. the map was drawn before 2023, but another yellow dot should be, let me take the laser pointer, should be added here to New Zealand, which experienced the invasion of this species in 2023. Now, similar to the aging clam, the golden mussel is another freshwater species native to East Asia. It was first identified in 1991 in Argentina. And only last year, even less than a year ago, it was identified for the first time in California. So this is a separate event of invasion. And so the bottom line, what I'm trying to say here is that we have at least two cases when even after the ballast water management regulation is already effective, we still see new invasions. So it's only a growing problem. Okay, here you're gonna see a scale bar going from 1 micron to 10 centimeters with different invasive species. Let's start with the smallest one on the left side. Bacteria can clearly be invasive species, but they cannot cause macrofouling. They will not clog your equipment. They can cause different other problems. For example, coral disease, which is what I was studying during my second degree. Also, they can cause operational problems such as biofilms. But again, this is not macrofouling. It's not clogging your equipment. Next, slightly larger microbes such as diatoms and algae, they can clog your equipment, but this is not the topic of our webinar. UV can be used to treat those, but again, that's another story. What we are going to focus on is a larger organism, mainly invertebrates, with their various life stages. These range from, let's say, 100 micron. You can see this tube worm larvae and the barnacle larvae. They are around 100 micron in size when they are small. Then when they are already adult, they are about 1 inch size. All right. So here I was talking about many invasive species which are not part of the macrofouling, but that's a list of many species that are macrofoulers. Some freshwater and some saltwater, seawater. Now, what they all have in common is that they have the critical feature is that they all have a free-floating life stage. This free-floating life stage is also called planktonic, like plankton, or larval stage. Larva is like the baby. And so they can go through most of the filters and settle down on your equipment. Other than this planktonic life stage, another thing they have in common that usually they require like a very specific temperature for proliferation and high calcium for the shells. Okay, I couldn't resist adding to the presentation this beautiful image with a marine organism that are macrofoulers. So just take a minute to enjoy it. And remember the tube worms over here. They will come back later during Ami's talk. Now, in freshwater organism, the calcium that is needed for the shells could be a limiting parameter in some environments, but in seawater, there's plenty of calcium, but carbonate could be a limiting factor. All right, next. Now we're going to talk about the traditional treatment methods, starting with mechanical filters. Filtration would be the first guess for someone who just looked at the photos, right? They are pretty big organisms. However, while filters will effectively block adult mussels, the larva like the 100-micron ones, right, can easily penetrate standard filtration system and subsequently settle on internal equipment surfaces, initiating new fouling. In some cases, also, another problem of filtration is there are some regulatory constraints limiting the ability to use large amount of water for backwash and maintenance. Going to chemical treatment, yes, indeed, it is effective against bacteria and many microorganisms. However, they do not provide comprehensive control for all aquatic invasive species. Beyond operational factors like chemical handling, storage, potential corrosion, the primary concern with chemicals is their environmental discharge. Stringent permits often prohibit and severely restrict the releasing of biocides to the environment. Basically, this area of why we are not going to discharge biocides to the environment is called ecotoxicity, which is the risk of chemicals of harming the local aquatic species and ecosystem. All right. This is like the one slide where you're gonna learn a little bit about the biology of invasive species in the context of macrofouling. So what we are looking at is the sexual life cycle of a typical macrofouler. In this case, it's a barnacle. As you can see, the life cycle is divided into two critical phases. The sessile, the gray one, is the attached life form, and in light blue is the planktonic, the free swimming. The UV can treat only the planktonic phases. The cycle will, let's begin with the adult. The adult is releasing microscopic larvae. In this case of barnacles, it's called naupli. It releases the naupli into the water, initiating the planktonic phase. The early larval stage is about 100 micron and can penetrate the filters, as we just discussed. After several molds, the larva can reach the size of about 500 microns with the sole purpose in life attaching to the surface and metamorphosis into a juvenile, which is the sessile form already. Okay, now this is the last my last slide. In many cases, when we are asked to treat macrofouling, the problem the client is experiencing is with an animal we already have some experience with, especially if it's mussels. But in some cases, there are animals, macrofoulers, that we never treated before, that we don't have experience with. But we have the basic science saying that there are two rules of thumb to predict the likelihood of success. One is transparency of the larva, and the second is the life cycle complexity. So I will explain. Transparency. If the organism's early life stage are transparent, our HOD UV disinfection treatment is very likely to be successful, but not only it's going to be successful, it's probably going to require a pretty low UV dose for effective inactivation. Now, what do I mean when I say life cycle complexity? Okay, in this image here, we see a bryozoa, and the inner cycle, the small one, is the sexual cycle we just went through the planktonic stage. But in this case, which is not the majority of cases, there's an alternative life cycle. In this case, the adult, a fragment of it just breaks down, and it can start a new colonization of another area. So clearly, UV cannot treat such a big fragment. So the solution is adding upstream to the UV pretty large filtration system of about, let's say, 400 microns. So that we call it dual barrier approach, as Ami will explain in length in a minute. And yeah, that's it from Ami. Stage is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Asaf, for presenting the features of this important problem. Now I will briefly discuss Atlantium's solution, and we will see some examples of installations. Okay, so first of all, when can we expect clients to approach us? There are a number of factors. Usually, it's after they have tried using chemicals, but it simply didn't work, and they're still suffering from AIS-related issues, even after massive chemical injection. Sometimes, of course, chemicals can also cause secondary problems. Needless to say, the chemicals that can kill the mussels will also damage other marine species. Another factor why client will approach us is environmental regulations, either self-imposed by the company or externally. And these regulations require the plant to stop dumping polluted water back into the environment. In both cases, customer needs to find a chemical-free solution to its AIS problem. Either way, Atlantium's approach, as Asaf mentioned before, is combining between filtration. Usually it's in the ranges of 300 to 600 microns, and the HOD UV. So in simple words, we say filter the large mussels and kill the larvae. So the large mussels have little concern with regards to the clogging of the downstream equipment, as at this lifestyle stage, the mussels lack the mobility and adherence capabilities. However, those large mussels can shade on the larva while going through the UV and thus reducing the UV effectiveness. And this is why we've adopted the dual barrier approach. So most of the installations that we have to date, I think more than 50%, are for hydropower plants. And usually the purpose is to protect the heat exchangers in the turbine bearings. Okay, so this is a typical hydro plant, of course. And in this hydro plant, there's a relatively small stream. I say small because it's all relative to the main flow in the penstock that is rotating the turbine. So usually you will find an 8 or 10 or a 12-inch line that is going for cooling purposes of different equipment. And the AIS-related issues that we see in these cases are either direct mussel settlements in condensers or heat exchangers that dramatically reduces the heat transfer coefficient, or we will see clogging of the filters that protects these heat exchangers, and thus reducing the water flow. And sometimes we're seeing both, meaning we will see settlements on the heat exchangers, reducing the heat transfer coefficient and at that point in time, when the plant requires more water for cooling, the clogging of the filters will not allow, and basically instead of increasing the flow, you will have a decrease in the flow because of the clogging. So this is what we usually encounter in hydro plants, and the location of installation should be on the takeoff to the auxiliary cooling loop. Okay, let's look at some of our installations. And first, I would like to describe the bio boxes. I'll take a step back here and describe these. So when we're doing standard disinfection using our HOD UV, it's very easy to show the performance of the UV by taking microbial samples at the inlet and the outlet of the UV. And this is not the case when we want to show the performance of downstream equipment. So sometimes in order to demonstrate the effect of the HOD UV, we're using a special box, actually two boxes, connected to the inlet and the outlet of the UV, so that each box is getting a continuous flow of water and is continuously being overflow to the drain. So the BioBox is a simple way, I would say, to demonstrate and verify the performance of the HOD system. Inside each box, there are plates made from different materials in order to mimic the downstream conditions in the strainer or in the heat exchangers. Sometimes it's metal and sometimes it's a plastic. So one example I can give of using these bio boxes is from Spain. So this is a food producer. And here you can see the UV was installed here on a 6-inch line. This was a full flow of 100 cubic meter per hour. And the bio boxes were installed at the inlet and the outlet of the UV. So the site was using seawater for cooling purposes, and the seawater from Mediterranean Sea. And the client suffered from massive load of the Red Sea mussels that somehow the Red Sea mussels migrate all the way from the Red Sea into the Mediterranean Sea. And if you want to see how massive load looks like, so I think this picture shows it well. This is from the condenser on site. And when looking at this photo, one can understand why it is so hard to do to open and do the maintenance for this equipment, and why it is so hard to verify the performance in real time. So the massive detachment of the mussels can occur in one day during the summer. And when the water temperature reaches a critical point, so what we will usually see is during the hot season, we will have the buildup of mussels in the piping, and in one day, I would say that approximately 27, 28 degrees Celsius represents the upper thermal limit for many of these marine organisms. And then you will see a detachment in one day, and basically this is a plant shutdown. So after we had the evaluation period on that site, the plates were taken out from the bio boxes, and here you can see that's the plate from before the HOD UV, and that's the plate after. So mussel settlements clearly reduced after the UV treatment. What was interesting here, that even though in this site the goal was to deal with the Red Sea mussels, the findings on site shows also the prevention of these white tube worms. I can't remember their names, but these worms have calcium shell, and they're even more problematic than the mussel because the settlements create a very dense film that is very hard to remove. Okay, one more demonstration site was in Brazil, this time for golden mussels. And this is in the hydropower plant owned by Copel, which is one of the largest electric company in Brazil, in Paraná. So here the pilot was conducted in one of the auxiliary loops, cooling the turbine lubricant. The bearings have a lubricant and they are cooled by water, and this is in most cases what we see. So one HOD system was installed here on a flow of 100 cubic meter per hour. So again, like the previous case, this was not a side stream test, rather than a full scale installation. And right upstream to the UV, you see a micron filter. I think it was 150 micron here. So bio boxes were placed before and after the UV, and also other auxiliary loops. So the test in Copel here lasted 1 year, and it was exposed to seasonal changes such as temperature and monsoons. Eventually, at the end of this pilot, the system was removed from the line. The pipes before and after UV were open for examination, and the mussel settlements before the UV was much heavier than after the UV. Also, the results were quantified using the bioboxes plates in a report that is not shown here. Okay, in this case, this is a pilot case in Europe. The client here was a water provider, and he wanted to adopt strict policy against the use of toxic chemicals or chemicals that can produce undesirable byproducts. And so they were looking for alternative solutions. They tested some technologies, among them is UV. And the focus here was to inactivate mussels at the intake point of the reservoir, as well as in the piping downstream to the reservoir. So they were looking for three main things. One, safe for drinking water. Two, suitable for large scale. And three, can effectively prevent the settlements even after 24 hours in piping. So for this purpose, they set up a pilot consisting of three different types of UV, as shown in the photo here. So from top to bottom, this is competitors' low pressure UV, competitors' medium pressure UV. We didn't touch the difference between low pressure and medium pressure UV, but these are two types of UV technologies and the HOD UV system. Some of the results. So here you can see dry mass scraped from the boxes, and you can see it visually, while Atlantium had the lowest amount of dry mass from the bioboxes, and this is quantified. Again, it's ongoing, and we also have very nice results in terms of the DP buildup downstream to the UV system, because they were using a long pipe to see the buildup as a representing to the settlement. So maybe the most famous hydro dam that we've installed the HOD UV in is the Hoover Dam, USA. So client here was the US Bureau of Reclamation, and the client was looking for a solution to deal with the operational issue caused by the quagga mussels. So by now we discussed about zebra, quagga, golden mussel, the Red Sea mussels, and some worms, the tube worms. So the client here, client in Hoover, did a long study, and they tried chemicals as well as different UV systems. Finally, chose Atlantium UV systems, and eventually we had, if I'm not mistaken, more 11 systems installed below the ground here. So following the successful installation, it was also published, by the way, in the Hydro Review magazine. And follow this installation, Atlantium was officially declared as the technology of choice by the Bureau of Reclamation, and it followed further installation of more than 40 systems to protect cooling loops in the Hoover, Parker, and Glen Canyon dams. They are located in the lower Colorado River. So just a quick glance from other full-scale installation. So here we see heat exchangers from the Parker Dam before, after UV installation. This is a basket strainer from Davis Dam before and after. And I'm also showing Porto Primavera in Brazil. And this is an example that the macrofouler here was Cordylophora caspia. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it right. And despite the fact that it has more than one reproductory path, the HOD system was able to effectively protect against this macrofouler. Okay, finally, this is a list, a partial list of the AIS installation to date. Most of them are in hydropower plants, since this was the focus of today's webinar. Of course, we have many more installation in huge water transfer projects in California and other places. So some key takeaways. AIS is an emerging concern globally. The HOD technology brings new and proactive approach for AIS control. It showed superior performance over both chemical treatment and other UV types, and the technology is well proven for variety of AIS and water type. I hope I didn't talk too much, and I think this is the time for some Q&As. Asaf?
Yeah, I'll take a couple of them. Well, there's one question about why the map of invasive species doesn't mention Brazil. That's a really good one. Yeah, because it's probably just because it's not a very good map. Because yes, well, I guess the person who made the map was more academic because Argentina is where the invasion started. But yeah, it's probably a bigger issue in Brazil, at least from Atlantium's experience. So that's a good point. Another question I can take, because most of them are going to be for Ami, is can this technology treat all invasive species? Or let's say I'm going to fine-tune the question to can it treat all macrofoulers? Then we don't know all of them. For example, the life cycle I was showing before was of the barnacle, and this is an example of an animal we don't have an experience with, but according to like the two rules of thumb, the larva is transparent and there is no alternative life cycle, then we expect that it should be successful. But if we get an option to test it, we're going to do the biobox test, and then we're going to learn and of course share with everyone. I mean, I think most of the other questions are more for you.
Okay. Yeah, there's quite a few. Can you tell me which Bureau of Reclamation facility is using this technology? For the cases I've shown, it's Colorado River, I would say. How large a pipe can be fitted with the UV technology? Could a 36-inch pipe be equipped with UV? So just recently, the answer is yes, because we have a 900 millimeter reactor. I think you answered, do you cover all types of AIS? What would be the required UV dose for this application? I'm not sure if I've answered it or not. It has a variety. I can say it's in the, let's say it's in the double figures of the dose. You can take energy consumption of between, again, this is a matter of water transparency, but you can take it as 0.01 kilowatt hour per cubic meter up to 0.1 or 0.15 if the water is really low transparency. Would UV create byproducts in the water? The answer is no, and definitely not in these dose ranges. How about using copper-based chemicals? Are they safe and reliable? So for copper, we had one client. I know some anecdotal information about it. I'm not sure it was thoroughly investigated. Just like other chemicals that damage muscles, I believe that they also cause some fish mortality. What would be the energy consumption? So this was answered previously. How long does the installation takes, and how soon does it start operating after installation? So both of them, I mean, if you have a prefabricated piping, it's a matter of a few hours. We know it because we have other, just like in hydro dams, we have other facilities that it's crucial not to make a long outage, like in hotels and hospitals, that we have other applications. So we can do it in a few hours, the installations, and also the operation is quite fast. What is the required contact time of UV light with water for effective treatment? The required, I'm not sure about the required, but I can say that in average velocities that we see, like 1, 2, 3 meter per second, so that the time in the reactor is few seconds, from 1 to 2 seconds in the reactor. What is the lifespan of UV lamps? Normally 5,000 hours. The medium pressure lamps needs to be replaced. I will just mention that in most of the installation, we have a few lamps, between 1 to 4 lamps. So this is the average lifespan. Thank you for joining. Asaf, thank you for attending. Until next time.